In the first talk, we traveled from Mahu to Dapoli, Satara, and we spent some time in Bombay. And that was how physically we traveled. The birth of Bhim in Mahu, and then when he was 2, he was brought to Dapoli. Then his father migrated to Satara, and from Satara, for the want of better life, the Sakpal family migrated to Bombay in 1904. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar had a very interesting time in Satara, because as we know that his mother died when he was 6 years old, and his father remarried. And young Bhim didn't like that his father remarried, because he was having that kind of a rebellious spirit. So he did not like that his father remarried. And there is one very important event that took place. He wanted to run away from his family because he couldn't withstand the family situation. So he wanted to run away, and he had no money. So he tried to attempt a theft. He had an access to a purse, and he attempted 4 times. 3 times he failed in his attempt of robbery, but the 4th time he was very successful. And when he got hold of the purse, he found that there are very few annas left in the purse, and that amount was insufficient to make a journey to Bombay. So he gave up all his plans to run away to Bombay and started studying very seriously. This is one of the very important events that has taken place in Satara, and we know that the family came to Bombay in 1904, and they lived in Dabakchar for some period of time, and then the family migrated to Bombay Improvement Trust. And the 2 famous rooms, room number 50 and 51, we should not forget, where Baba Saheb lived when he was a child. He passed his matriculation examination in 1907, and his success was celebrated as kind of an achievement, because he was the first untouchable boy from the Western India to pass the matriculation examination. And Dada Keluskar, who was a personal friend of Ramaji, they were very close friends, wanted to felicitate Bhimrao, and a big program was held. I think it must be a very small program, but a great dignitary came for that program, and his name was S.K. Bode. He was a leader of non-Brahman movement, and he presided over that unique program where Baba Saheb was felicitated. He gave a speech. Dadaji Keluskar presented the life of Gautama Buddha to young Ambedkar, and that was kind of a turning point in Baba Saheb's life. He got very good marks in Persian language. He couldn't enroll for the Sanskrit language because the study of Sanskrit language was discouraged to a boy who was coming from the untouchable family. Though he wanted very much to study the Sanskrit language, he couldn't. The teachers, the Brahman teachers, did not encourage Dr. Ambedkar to pursue his interest in Sanskrit. So he has to enroll for the Persian language, and he was so good at it that he secured good marks in Persian language. And in 1907, after his matriculation examination, that time he was 16 years old. We can imagine a 16 years old young Baba Saheb Ambedkar. Some account says that his height was 5 foot 7 inches. He was very heavily built, because his father, who was a military man, disciplined him in such a way that he was very nicely built. And if you look at his photos of that period, which are available to us, he looks kind of a very strong man, even at the age of 16. So he was 16 and he passed the matriculation examination. The next year, he got admitted in the Elphinstone College. 1908, he was admitted in the Elphinstone College, which is attached to Bombay University. It's still a very famous college, and it was a very famous college in that period. You can imagine the city of Bombay almost 100 years back. Now there are so many colleges all around in Bombay, but that time in 1908, Elphinstone College was a very famous college, and Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar got admission in that college for his BA. For his BA examination, BA degree, he got admission in that. But in 1909, he could not continue his education. His family was so poor. His father found it very difficult to sustain all those responsibilities, the financial responsibilities. His sister was married in Bombay, and they had a big family to support. And it was very difficult to support Babasaheb's education. So he lost 1 year, 1909. He could not study because of the financial difficulties. So he studied for 1 year and then he has to discontinue his education. So when Dada Keduskar heard about these difficulties, that young Ambedkar can't study because of his financial difficulties, because he was such a good teacher. Dadaji Keduskar loved young Ambedkar so much. He was so much fond of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. He used to see him in garden studying all the time. And Dada Keduskar himself was an assistant teacher in the Wilson High School. So he knew the importance of education because he was from that non-Brahman movement. He was a very learned man of letters. Literally, he was a very good researcher. The way he has written the book on Gautam Buddha and Shivaji in that period is very astonishing. He was a brilliant man. And he couldn't, when he saw Dr. Ambedkar can't continue or he could not continue his education, he was at pains. And he took young Bhim to meet the Maharaja of Baroda, Sayaji Rao Gaikwad, because in one of the speeches, Sayaji Rao Gaikwad proclaimed that he will support the education of the untouchables. So when Maharaja came to Bombay, Dada Keduskar took young Ambedkar with him and they met the Maharaja of Baroda. Upon hearing the situation of young Bhim, the Maharaja of Baroda granted a scholarship of rupees 25 per month so that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar could continue his education. Scholarship that was granted to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was 25 rupees per month by the Maharaja of Baroda. And this scholarship encouraged young Bhim to pursue his BA degree, Bachelor of Arts degree. During this period in Bombay, Ramaji taught his son so well that he made him perfect in English. Because as I said, Ramaji Sakpal was a brilliant man. He was a teacher for 14 years. He was a headmaster of the normal school. He was very fluent in English. He was not only fluent in English, but he could translate from Marathi to English. He was such a perfect translator. And he taught all those methods of translation to young Bhim. And Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, when he was a teenager, he developed such a fond of reading that whenever he got hold of any book, he used to read it and finish it. He was such a voracious reader. His interest in book, even that age, was so much that his father has to borrow money from his daughter. His daughter was also poor, so sometimes she has to pawn her jewelry in order to get some money so that Ramji can buy books for young Ambedkar. He was so interested as a young man in the books, in the pursuit of knowledge. He was devoted to the knowledge. And in 1912, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar passed his BA examination. The same year, a son was born to him. Because that in that period there was child marriage. Baba Sahib got married. He was 17 years old, and his wife was 9 years younger to him. So he passed his BA in 1912, and he didn't get grades, I would say, because if we look at his grades and the marks he got in his BA examination, he got 469 marks out of 1000, not even 50%. So those who are dull in their graduation should not be worried, because Baba Sahib got only 469 marks out of 1000 in his BA examination. So there is still a lot of hope for those of us who has not got good grades. So he was 21 when he passed his BA examination. He lost his 1 year. Then he passed his BA examination in 1912, not with flying colors. He ended up with getting 469 marks out of 1000. And he has to work even in that period for the Maharaja of Baroda. And he didn't want to go for the job because he didn't want to leave Bombay. He didn't want to leave his family. He was so attached to his father. He was so attached to his family. He didn't want to go to Baroda to serve the Maharaja of Baroda and his administration. He didn't want to go. He has to go. So in January 1913, he went to Baroda. And he barely worked for 15 days. He received a telegram in Baroda that his father is a very sick man. He is suffering and he is on his deathbed. So Dr. Ambedkar received a telegram in Baroda that his father is not well. He has to go back to Bombay to attend to his father. So young Bhim, he goes to the train station, gets on the train in order to go to Bombay. He is traveling and he arrives in Surat. He comes to Surat. The train stops there. And he wants to buy some barfi for his father. So he gets down from the train and he is now on the platform searching for the barfi and trying to buy some barfi. When he is busy in buying the barfi, the train leaves and he misses the train. And then he has to wait for another train to come and take him to Bombay. And because of this, because he misses his train, because he got down from the train to buy some barfi for his father, when he reaches home, it's already very late. And his father is about to die. So when Baba Sahib reaches home, his father dies. And the date on which Baba Sahib's father Ramaji died is February 2nd, 1913. So he serves for the first period of his life, he serves the Baroda government, Baroda administration just for 15 days and then he has to come back. And very unfortunately he misses the train in Surat. He couldn't reach on time and therefore he couldn't see his father. So as soon as he arrives, his father dies. And it is the saddest thing in the life of Baba Sahib. Baba Sahib has later said that was a very sad moment in his life because he had such a good relationship with his father. Because his father built him up. He made him into the man of courage, the man of scholarship. And we are going to look at briefly, we are going to look at life of Ramaji Sakpal, but very briefly later on in the course of our talk today. Again, in 1913, Dada Keduskar comes to the rescue of young Ambedkar. Because the Maharaja of Baroda has declared that he has announced that he will give some scholarship for some students to study in a very famous college in America. And Dada Keduskar, as you can now understand, is a very informed man. So the moment he heard about this scholarship, that the Maharaja of Baroda is planning to send a few students to America, he meets the Maharaja. Some account says that a very useful conversation took place between the Maharaja of Baroda, Sayaji Rao Gaikwad, and young Ambedkar. We don't know the details of the conversation because we don't have the first-hand accounts, but it is said that Maharaja asked Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar what he is going to do after his studies. Is he going to pursue the social work? Is he going to serve? Is he going to earn money? What he is going to do? And if he wants to serve the people, how much time he will get if he is working for the Baroda administration? And it is said that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar very sternly replied that he will do all the three activities with full devotion. He didn't say that I will do only this or that or that. He said that I will do all the three responsibilities very thoroughly. But because we don't have the first-hand account of that, we have to rely on the second-hand or even the third-hand account. So Babasaheb Ambedkar got the scholarship for higher studies. The another scholarship was granted to his son. So we can imagine the heart and the greatness of Sayaji Rao Gaikwad. We are going to look at the Maharaja in one of the talks. His personality, his generosity, his fondness for the welfare of the people, his association with Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, his friendship with Dada Keduskar. So we can imagine a big-hearted Maharaja in Sayaji Rao Gaikwad. He allocated one scholarship to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. And we can see that Babasaheb, if we look at the grades Babasaheb got, 469 out of 1000. But he could sense something in him. Dada Keduskar sensed something very great in young Ambedkar. That's why he took him. That's why he provided reference to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. And the day on which this scholarship was allotted to Babasaheb, the date is 4th April 1913. And the scholarship was 11.50 pounds per month. 11.50 pounds per month. It must be very huge at that period of time, just sufficient to cover some expenses. But if we compare it now, if we multiply 11.50 with 80, it's about 800 rupees or something per month. It's not much. That time it must be a very significant scholarship. So the Maharaja gave a scholarship of 11.50 pounds per month for the period of 3 years. Very significant contribution towards higher education of Babasaheb Ambedkar. But there is something very interesting fact about Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's graduation result. The year he graduated in 1912, Babasaheb couldn't get good marks. But the first ranker, you must remember his name. The name of the first ranker who topped the list was A.B. Gajendra Gadkar. The person who topped the list that year in 1912 in the BA examination, his name was A.B. Gajendra Gadkar, and later on he became the principal of Siddhartha College. A.B. Gajendra Gadkar. He became the principal of Siddhartha College in Bombay, which Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar founded. So Ramji Sakpal, who had a tremendous influence on Babasaheb Ambedkar, deep impact on the life of Babasaheb Ambedkar during his formative years, these two great men. Ramji Sakpal, he was not just a father to him, but a teacher, a guide, and we should look at his personality. And also, later on, we are going to look at the personality of Dadaji Keluskar, because these two men influenced young Bhim so much. So Ramaji Sakpal never drank wine. He completely abstained from drinking. He not only abstained from drinking, but he never ate meat, because he was religiously very pious man. He never ate meat, he never indulged in wine, and he had fondness for reading spiritual literature. So he used to read stories from Ramayana, Mahabharata to his children. But when Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar read the life of Gautam Buddha, he found the difference between the great Buddha and the life of Rama and Krishna. So he started posing the questions to his father, that how could they be the role models for the humanity? Young Ambedkar, when he read, because his father used to read the stories of Karna, stories of Arjun to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar when he was a child. But when Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar came in contact with the Buddha, he was so impressed by the life of the Buddha that he used to challenge, he used to ask questions to his father, that how can Rama and Krishna be the role models for the humanity? Because here is the Buddha, who is such an ethical person, and you look at these ideas that you have been teaching us. So Ramji Sakpal used to read and recite the spiritual stories. He was very fond of bhajans and kirtans, devotional songs, because he was Kabirpanthi. So whenever he had time, when there was no electricity, because they had to cut the electricity for a long period of time in order to save money, so when in the darkness of the night he used to recite, sing the bhajans. He used to sing the dohas of Kabir. He was called by his friends as Subedar Ramaji, because he was Subedar. So he was addressed as Subedar Ramji. He was the master of Marathi language. So he read Tukaram, he read Moropanta and his Kekavalis. And he was a translator. He used to translate Marathi language into English language. And he had developed special techniques for translation. And he trained Dr. Ambedkar in English language with the help of some books. And the books written by Tarkhalkar, 3 books written by Tarkhalkar on English, were very helpful to Ramaji Ambedkar to teach Bhimrao. Some account says that he was a cricketer, because he was in the military, so he might be playing the cricket. Ramaji Ambedkar was a cricketer. He played football. He must be a very different man. And he was a great friend and admirer of Mahatma Jyotiba Phule. Dada Keluskar was a personal friend of Mahatma Jyotiba Phule. Dadaji Keluskar was also friend of Ramaji Sakpal. So he had many special qualities. Ramaji Sakpal must be a very dignified man, a man of self-respect. And he had taught so much to Babasaheb, so much. And he was a headmaster, as I said in the beginning, that he was a headmaster. Despite of all these qualities, one of the qualities that we must look at of Ramaji Sakpal, which is so important for us. So in 1892, when the untouchables, the Mahars, were delisted from the army. Ramaji Sakpal took part in a protest. He took part in a protest against the government, that how can they delist the untouchables from the army. They had every right to join the army. Baba Sahib gave a very famous talk on the birthday, on the anniversary of birthday anniversary of Yamaji Ranade. Mahadev Govind Ranade was a very famous social reformer who was a great friend and a good friend of the untouchables of that time. So he used to help the people from the untouchable caste to draft the petitions. And Ramaji Sakpal apparently met Mahadev Govind Ranade, and they drafted a petition to protest and to implore the government, the British government, to enroll the untouchables back into the army. And Dr. Ambedkar saw the copy of that letter when he searched his father's paper after his death. So we can imagine what kind of a person of social consciousness that Ramaji Sakpal must be. He was so very devoted to the social problems. He took great interest in the social problems. He was religious, he was a pious man, he was a disciplinarian, he was a strict man, he was a man of letters, and he was a man of great social consciousness. And he must have exerted tremendous influence on Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar. His life must have influenced Baba Sahib so much that we see all these shades in Baba Sahib's life. When we look at the entire life of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, we see all these traits in Baba Sahib's life. He never drank wine. He was having a very pious, very generous heart. He cultivated that kind of devotional attitude. He took Kabir as his guru. He devoted his complete life for the society. So we can just reflect on the personality of Ramaji Sakpal, who died on February 2nd, 1913. The very important year in the life of Baba Sahib. In the second month of that year, Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar's father died, and that was the very sad moment in his life. After 2 months, he wins scholarship to go to Columbia University. That's in 1913. So when he was in studying in the Elphinstone College, there were some teachers who were very fond of young Ambedkar. They liked young Ambedkar so much. They not only helped him in buying the books, but there was one outstanding professor whose name we should all remember. His name was Professor Muller. He loved young Ambedkar so much. And Dr. Ambedkar had very fondest memory of this great teacher, Professor Muller. The upper caste teachers did not treat young Ambedkar very well. But this teacher, Professor Muller, treated Baba Sahib Ambedkar so well. Sometimes he even loaned his clothes to Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar. And he helped Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar in his studies. So Professor Muller was also one of the very great teachers that Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar made in his life. And this is all taking place 100 years back in the city of Bombay. And the city of Bombay that time was not very convenient to travel. Very difficult to travel. So sometimes he has to take a train in order to go to his college. Because we can't estimate the distances because of the development of transportation in the present day Bombay, but the Bombay of 100 years old was very difficult to travel. So it was not easy for Baba Saheb Ambedkar to go to the college. He has to make tremendous efforts to seek education. So he has to fight the caste prejudices, he has to fight the poverty, he has to fight all the time. So today we come to the conclusion of the period between 1907 to 1913, and now we are in the middle of 1913. And in the next class we are going to look at how Dr. Ambedkar travelled from Bombay to New York and what happened in New York during 1913 to 1916, the period of scholarship and the period Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar spent in the Columbia University. So these 3 years in America is going to be the topic of our talk the next week.